mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2 of the new Hulu docuseries Mike, which is about Mike Tyson. These first two episodes are called Thief and Monster, and I'm going to speak about them in fairly non-spoilery terms. I think I'm probably going to carry on with this one for full kind of like review coverage. I haven't really decided yet. I'm definitely going to at least give the third episode a shot before I make a decision on whether or not I'm going to commit to all 8. But as of right now, I find this show to be entertaining enough to at least give the third one a chance. But before I get into this non-spoilery review, I want to start by shouting out my first two patrons, Delvin Cox and Factual. If you're curious about the Patreon and you want to know what the tiers are, what they're comprised of, how much they cost, there's a video in the feed called Major Announcement. It's probably about 3 or 4 videos back or so, and you can watch that one and get all the details about the Patreon. And there's also a link to the Patreon in the description as well. So, moving on, like I mentioned that the shows, the first 2 episodes, they're titled Thief and Monster. Thief, episode 1, it kind of loosely ties into, not loosely, it very directly ties to Mike Tyson's childhood and how he spent a lot of that time as a thief, but also kind of like how that childhood shaped who he is. When you have a guy like Mike Tyson, who's a very unique individual, I think it's important to show what kind of upbringing creates a person like that. And even though episode 1 kind of was, it was okay, it was fine, I didn't dislike it or anything, it was one of those ones that's necessary for you to see that. You need to see what this guy's upbringing was like, how it created the Mike Tyson that we all know, but even more so, how it contrasts with the Mike Tyson that we all know. Because that helps you build a more kind of like a 3D character and somebody who becomes relatable. None of us can relate to Mike Tyson. Like, he's so unique. But a lot of us can relate to his upbringing. A lot of people can relate to his upbringing and can understand how that can create a guy who's so complex today. So that's a very necessary episode, and it is still entertaining. It's just not great. Like, I wasn't watching it like, oh man, this show is great. I was watching it like, okay, this is kind of like good popcorn show. But the second episode, Monster, I think is a little bit better. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in a little bit when I talk about some of like my overall general thoughts of the first 2 episodes. But the title itself refers to Cus D'Amato's the image that he wanted to present for Mike Tyson, and we all kind of knew that's. You know, we say a lot, we as fans of the sport or of Mike Tyson have always said that a lot of Mike Tyson's fights were won before he even entered the ring because of the persona that he created for himself, the image, that fear that he instilled in his opponents before they even stepped in the ring with him. And that image, that persona, that was what Cus D'Amato brought, one of the things that Cus D'Amato brought to his relationship with Mike Tyson. Cus D'Amato was his trainer, by the way, and manager. Cus D'Amato dies fairly early in Mike's career. That's not like a spoiler, I think. Mike talks about that all the time, about how Cus D'Amato's death affected him. But it's important to see how Cus helped create the Mike Tyson that we came to know, and we get a lot of that in that second episode titled Monster. But the show overall, it's in a similar vein to a lot of these kind of like docuseries that Hulu has been putting out lately that are based on real events. They all kind of have that same vibe. This one is a little bit different for 2 reasons. One, it seems to be based upon this Mike Tyson one-man stand-up show that he did. Not stand-up makes it sound like it was a comedy, but this one-man show that he did. It was called Undisputed Truth, and it was directed by Spike Lee, and I think he did it in a few cities. It wasn't like a thing where like I don't think it was like a 50-city tour or anything like that, but I know he did it in New York. I think he did it in like Vegas as well. But it's based upon the version that was released to the public that was directed by Spike Lee, and it's currently available on HBO Max if you haven't seen it. I haven't seen it, but it pulls from that one-man show, complete with Trevante Rhodes, who plays Mike Tyson, in the same outfit and everything. Like, it actually does that, like shows clips of him from that show, obviously with Trevante Rhodes as Mike Tyson kind of narrating. So That's the material that it borrows from, and I think borrowing from publicly available material that's intimate, I think is unique to this show. And then also you have the fact that this one I think is really elevated by the performances. And that's not my way of trying to shit on Amanda Seyfried or Seyfried, Seyfried I think is how you pronounce it, in The Dropout, or anybody in the cast of Dope Sick, or anybody in the cast of what's the one about We Work? What's the name of that? I can't remember the name of that show, but like that had Jared Leto in it. Like all of these shows have great casts, but I think the guy who plays Tyson as a teenager is great in the second episode. We are introduced to Customato at the end of the first episode, and I did not know that we're gonna get Harvey fucking Keitel in this show. Harvey Keitel. And in the second episode in particular, this is what makes it so great, is the performances of Harvey Keitel and the actor, I'm sorry, whoever you are, that I didn't have the wherewithal to look up your name before I did this. And I promise I'm not going to disrespect you like that. If you appear in any future episodes, I will say this actor's name, but I don't recognize the guy. But his performance, along with Harvey Keitel, really elevate that second episode. I love that guy, the guy that played Mike Tyson, and Harvey Keitel is incredible. So those attributes, I think, make this show a little bit different from the others. Like, I haven't seen Dope Sick, but I've watched The Dropout, and no, I'm not, by no means am I going to sit here and try to pretend that Amanda Seyfried is not good in this. But it's a different kind, like, we're talking Harvey fucking Keitel, man. Like, this is some next level shit. Like, I was shocked to see that they brought him in, and he was perfect. So really great stuff there. So a couple of quick thoughts. Like I said, this is going to be a short video because I'm not going to spoil anything. I just want to give general thoughts. And then from episode 3 on, depending on how long, if I decide to cover the whole season, that's when we're going to get a little bit more in-depth and spoilery. But that's going to largely depend on how this video performs. Actually, there's no other thing. It's really going to depend on how this video performs. If the video performs well, I'll definitely cover the rest of the season. If it performs mediocre, I'll probably watch episode 3, get that video up, see how that performs, and make a decision for there. And if it performs poorly, like Marvel stuff does, because there's just too much competition out there, then I'm probably not going to bother, and I'll just keep watching it. But I want to wrap up with a couple of thoughts on these first 2 episodes, just to give you an idea of what you're in for if you decide that you want to watch it, which I do recommend as of now. I do think it's worth at least checking out, see if it's something that's up your alley. I think everybody, we don't spend too much time with the kid, but in episode 1, but the teenage version of Mike Tyson and the adult version that Trevante Rhodes plays, incredible job with the voice work. Great stuff there. Perfect to the point where I can't rule out that the voice stuff might be better than what Jamie Foxx has done. Like, I mean, close my eyes, that's Mike Tyson, for sure. The shape that Trevante Rhodes got himself in, we haven't really, we just at the end of the second episode, we get to the point in Mike Tyson's life where he's old enough to be portrayed by Trevante Rhodes, so we mostly kind of see him in the one-man show piece. But when we do see him boxing, I don't know if Trevante Rhodes was always built like that, but whatever, if he wasn't, and he transformed his body, it looks just like Mike Tyson did at that age, and he's fucking yoked, man. Let's see, what else did I have here? I thought that his actual physical appearance, his face, looks less like Tyson when he's older at the one-man show and more like Tyson when he's younger. But at the end of the day, it's, when you know the person, it's hard to not see that person. I've seen Trevante Rhodes and other stuff, so I look at it, I'm like, I see Trevante Rhodes as Mike Tyson. I see Harvey Keitel as Customato, but it's Harvey fucking Keitel. I'm watching this shit, and I'm like, because I didn't know he was going to be in it. I was like, is that fucking Harvey Keitel? They got Harvey Keitel for this shit? You can tell I'm a Harvey Keitel fan. I love how the show is loyal to the fact that Mike Tyson always seems to walk around in shit that accentuates his package. like you've seen in like the trailers and stuff, he's like walking around in like his tidy whities and shit like that. They have that, and then like I think of when he was training for that fight that he had against Roy Jones Jr. Anytime they were showing him training for that, he was always in like these like almost like bikini type shorts. Like they're so short and tight, and it's almost like he would like tuck it up under his like balls and shit just to make sure that you could see it. It's such a fucking weirdo, this guy. But I like how they were loyal to that, because that is part of who he is, and it's just funny. Another thing that is interesting about these first two episodes, which is it's not gonna really play a part in his life going forward. At the point that we're at the end of the first two episodes, this aspect of his life isn't gonna play a huge part going forward. But they talk about his mom and his upbringing. There's some stuff I like there, and there's some stuff I didn't. But it kind of revolves around like how accurate of a portrayal is this, because the convos with his mom are a bit much. She is incredibly degrading. She berates him, is constantly discouraging, and it was so much that I kind of wondered, like, was she really this bad, or was she just bad and this is how they wanted to portray it, to portray that it was at an extreme level? Just because like it just felt like a little bit much. But on the other hand, I really did like how they play up the idea of how white people view that sort of behavior versus how black people view it. Like what he says, something like white people view this as like abuse, but black people view this as like how you make sure that your kid stays out of trouble and you stay safe. Like the idea of like beating the shit out of them when they do bad, because that's where this line happens is when the mom is coming to pick him up from one of his 18 million times in jail, and he's like, you know, this is what she thought was the best way to keep me out of trouble. And it never worked, but this is what she did. But I like that idea of juxtaposing how a white person will view it versus how a black person will view it. So I thought that was kind of good. And I like that there's a subtle kind of moment where he's talking about his mother's upbringing. And he says at some point, he said, this is before she met the man who was probably my dad. And I look that just throwing in that probably tells you more than you need, it tells you more about the mother than that word itself contains. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't use the word probably to describe a person like alone, but throwing that word probably into that space, into that sentence, tells you a lot about the mother and what kind of life she was living and just what she was doing at that time, and from her perspective to help protect her family. So they did some really good stuff with the mother, but I did feel the abuse was a little over the top. But at the end of the day, that could have been how she really was. Like the physical abuse from the mother, not terribly uncommon in a black household, but the verbal abuse, the degrading, putting him down, discouraging him, like the you ain't never gonna be shit kind of thing. Like I hope his mom wasn't like that, and that was just some a little bit of creative license that was used there. But yeah, interesting stuff with the mother. And then there's a part at the end that I liked as well, where he kind of talks about his mother dying. If this is part of the one-man show, he talks about his mother dying before he ever got successful. And that on its face is sad, but it's also, he says something like, she never got to know that I was okay. And if you think about the idea that, you know, she's beating him up when he gets arrested, she's constantly putting him down, but in a way of kind of like, be realistic. Like if you think you're gonna be a fighter, be realistic. You're a fucking idiot. Like there's a point where like a counselor calls him retarded. Like what? Like what kind of counselor does that? And we know that's not an ailment that Mike Tyson suffers from. He's just different. But like, who knows how they were talking about people in the 70s? Well, I mean, there's plenty of people who know. I'm just not one of them. I was born in the very, 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 very early 80s. But yeah, I like that, the idea of like all of the work that she put into at least trying to make him not die or go to jail early. She didn't even live to see that not happen, but then let alone missing like the legend that he became. So like, I thought that was a pretty profound statement as well. But so I'm going to wrap this one up. Again, I thought the second episode was pretty enjoyable. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to check out the third episode, the fourth episode, so on. Whether or not I'm going to cover it depends on you guys. If this episode does good, then I'm going to I'm going to cover the whole rest of the shit. If this episode doesn't do well, then you won't get that full coverage and you know if you're a fan of this channel, you know what I bring to full coverage. So you're not going to get that full coverage if the video doesn't do well. So share it if you're so inclined. And I will see you guys next Thursday for episode 3. Until then, peace.